And hello, everybody. Today, I'm going to be talking about the iPhone cameras, but the material we're going to talk about here is also applies to iPads and iPods. Now, there are hundreds of camera apps for the iPhones, and here's a few that I have on my iPhone. And some of them have some very special capabilities, like some of these here I use for astronomy, where you need to take longer exposures in order to get whatever it is you're looking at. But today I'm just going to talk about the camera app, the one that comes with your iPhone, so you all have it. Now, phones come in different sizes and have different arrangements of cameras, with up to 3 at the moment, with different focal lengths. This is an iPhone here with 3 cameras on it. This is the kind that I have. And you'll see on there that the upper one is the regular camera at the top. That's the camera that all the iPhones have. The one on the right is the wide angle, and I'll show you how that works in a moment. And then the bottom one is the telephoto lens, which magnifies what you're looking at. You can also see on the screen there at the top there's the flash. It's incidentally the same thing that's used for the flashlight on your iPhone. And at the bottom there's a microphone facing forward, and that's used for especially when you're taking videos. Now, sometimes you need to be able to see the screen quickly, to take a photograph quickly. So when you first turn on your iPhone, you'll notice down at the bottom hand side, there's a little camera there. So even before you signed into your iPhone, you can get straight to the camera and take a picture very quickly. Another way to be able to get it quickly is to move the camera application from wherever you've got it on your iPhone and put it down on the dock. So no matter where you are, which screen you're in, you can see there that I've got about 7 or 8 screens that I can scroll between. No matter where you are, those 4 icons remain at the bottom. So I'll leave one there as being a camera so I can get to it very quickly. Another possibility is to, and down in here too, if you not only click on it, but hold your button down, you'll get this pop-up menu, so it allows you to go straight to taking a selfie, a portrait selfie, or record a video. Apparently selfies are important to to a large segment of the population, especially the younger folks. And then finally, for those of you who use the control system, one of the things you can put on your control system, which incidentally you activate just by putting your finger up in the top right-hand corner of any window and scroll it down, and suddenly this thing will pop up and you'll see that I've put on there a camera, so that it's another way for me to get quickly to a camera. Sometimes potential pictures appear quickly, and you need to be able to take the shot before it goes away, especially if it involves children and animals. So when you look at your camera, this is what it looks like on your screen. You'll notice there's a white button there on the right-hand side. If you to just push on the white button, it would take a picture. And then you get a picture just like this. Now in here, I'm going to talk about several things. To compose a picture, it's better if you have a grid on your screen. You see here a grid that divides the picture into thirds. So placing an object somewhere on the grid can give it focus to attention. So in this particular case, you can see the attention here is the guy standing on the left, but I put him about 1/3 of the way across the picture, and it gives a more balanced looking picture. In order to do that, you need to go to the settings on your camera, on your iPhone, and if you go into settings, you'll find one for camera. And in there, you'll see there are a whole bunch of things which are worth knowing about. But the one I want to talk about right now is the grid. And you can see I've turned on the grid. So when you get the grid on here, it helps you to make better pictures. And by default, it's off. So I'm going to recommend that people go and turn this guy on. Oh, notice that just below that, you've got the mirror for front camera, but below that there's a view outside frame. You probably saw a moment ago that I'm not only looking at what's in the frame, but I can see stuff that's outside the frame. That also helps in many occasions to frame the picture so that you know what it is you're leaving out as well as what it is that you're including in. And I'll just mention too, right at the top there, there's formats. You can have different kinds of formats. The one that most people use is JPEG because it compresses and uses up less memory. Also, when we're using a grid, turning on the grid provides a cross for vertical shots. On the left, you see a cross in the center of the shot, and a second yellow one that hovers around while you tilt the camera this way and that. When you get the two crosses together, as you see in the right picture, then the camera is vertical and is right above that central strawberry in the picture. This can be useful, especially when you're using the camera to take pictures of documents that you later want to do optical character recognition on. But there are other scenarios too where you want to know what you're directly overhead. So it's just one of the benefits that you get when you use the grid system. Now, before taking a picture, you need to choose the camera mode. And here we're in portrait mode, but you can see at the bottom, I've put a red thing around what I'm using right now. So on the left picture there, you see I'm in photo mode. So what I'm going to do here when we press the white button is to get that photo within the frame, within the grid. Notice again that I've got picture outside the frame. But I can put my finger on that word photo and scroll it left or right. And in this case, I've scrolled it just one to the right. And you see, I'm now in video mode. And in video mode, you can take video, but you'd also see there are several other modes, and I'm going to talk about those as we move forward. So when you're in photo mode, and today's iPhones may offer slightly different zoom levels, but you can see that there are different zooms. I have just put a red marker around the zooms, which I have on mine, and you see there are 3 of them because I've got 3 cameras. And by using those, I can take different pictures. This is a picture taken outside my office window, and it shows what the wide angle will give us. Notice on here, the garbage can over on the left-hand side is within the picture. Notice the size of the house, which is there in the middle. So if I click on it, I come up to the regular camera. This is the one that everybody has. Notice the garbage can is now missing because the picture's not wide enough. And see how much bigger that house is. So this is at the 1x zoom. And if we click it again, we can go up to a 2x zoom. And you see now the house is quite a bit bigger. We zoomed in to the house, which even though it's some distance away, you see it now in the telephoto. Now, also, if you hold down the ×2 button, you can pop up a rotating wheel. This dial can be scrolled anything from 0.5, which is the widest setting, but you can take it as high as 10. But note that when you go above the value of 2, the zooming is done digitally, not optically. So you actually don't improve the resolution any. But here you see I've taken the picture and we're setting at about 3x. So now that house is even closer than it was. Now, when in any mode, you can touch on part of the picture. And that's where the iPhone will do its magic and try and focus on that spot and also set the exposure to that spot. You can see on this picture that I've put my finger right by the bush, and where I put my finger, there's a square yellow box going around it. Next to it, there's a little sun. So if at this point, having chosen to focus on that spot, if I didn't like the exposure for that spot, I could then move my finger onto the sun and move it either up or down to increase or decrease the exposure, make it lighter or make it darker. Here's the picture with the bush that's well exposed, but look up at the sky. The sky has gotten overexposed. It's nothing but white. And the picture would look like this. However, if I take my finger and poke it up at the top, you see now the square is up, the yellow square is now up in the sky, where you can see it's blue. You see a little sun next to it where I can scroll it up and down to change it. But now the exposure of the stuff in the background and the focus is well set, whereas look down at the bush, it's now become underexposed. So you need to experiment with this, but that's where a lot of the making good photographs becomes valuable. Know to put your finger on the thing that is most interesting. Now let's talk a little bit about pano mode. You see down at the bottom there, I've scrolled over to the side so that now we're no longer looking at photo. We've gone past portrait and we're looking at pano in yellow down there at the bottom. I've set the magnification to ×1, and you'll notice, oh, here we go, we're in pano. And you notice there's a white arrow. What the camera wants to do is to start taking a picture there, and you can see the picture on the left-hand side, and it wants you, once you've pushed on the white button at the bottom, to start scrolling slowly to the right in this case, though you can set the camera to go the other way if you want to, and it will slowly expose a panorama. So here I've taken the panorama, and you can see where I started the photograph on the left with that van, and I slowly scrolled around to the right. So now you can see a much wider exposure. And by being clever with this, you can get quite wide shots, which are dramatic. Here we see, hopefully most of you know where this is, but this is Coupeville, the wharf. And in the background, there's Mount Baker. Oops, what's going on here? Push the wrong button. You can make these things really wide. So here you've seen the whole of Penn Cove, starting from the western end and looking at the whole darn thing. All right, here we see I've set this thing over to the video mode now. So down at the bottom, you can see I've circled the video. And it started using that red button. And once you started using it, you see now up at the top there, it's telling you how much time has passed. But you can also see the red button at the bottom has changed. So that when you click on this change button, it'll stop the video. And you can see how long the video is by keeping your eye on the red numbers up at the top there. And here we are looking at a video taken with my iCamera. And notice that to make a good video, one of the things you need to do is either rest it on something very solid, or better still, go out and buy a jiggle-free tripod of some kind or another. I've gotten a hold of a tripod. This is an awful picture because the exposure is all wrong, but I just wanted to do this picture for two reasons. One, I want to show you that here's an iPhone mounted on a tripod, and I've got one of those tripods which is highly flexible. So if you want, you can take those legs and wrap them around a pole, wrap them around a tree branch, or whatever you want, or stand them up on things. It's terribly useful. And it's set up to where it's able to take an iPhone on the top, and you can see there's a little thing grabbing a hold of it. The other thing I want to point out is that in the background there's a chair. And what I really want to do is to shoot that chair So here it is. We got a great shot of a chair. And now the lighting is much better. I've picked somewhere where there's not too much contrast. But what I really want to do is take a picture of me on the chair. Now, in this case, if you look, you can see that I'm wearing an Apple Watch. So while I was sitting there, I used the watch to take the picture. If I was to look at my watch right now, this is what I'd see on it. On the Apple Watch, you can see there's the picture itself, and if I tapped on the picture, I would take a picture. But you see that the watch is telling me what the camera is seeing. That upper part there, while I'm looking at my watch and about to press the button, it can see that. Now, at the bottom of this picture, you can see there's a 3S. That means if you tap on the 3S, you can wait for 3 seconds so you can compose yourself, comb your hair, whatever it is you're going to do. And then you finish up with a portrait that looks like this. Notice that I put the subject at about a 1/3 position to give the whole picture additional beauty. So again, at the bottom here, I've slid off to another mode. This mode is the slow motion mode. So I clicked on slow motion. And again, when you use it, you'll see that at the top, first, let me tell you that if you go back again to the, to the camera session, we can tell how fast we want the pictures to be taken. In order to get slow motion, you have to take pictures very rapidly. The default here is at 120 frames per second. Notice that you normally take pictures at about 15 to 20 frames per second. If you want to, you can go even faster and go to 240, which gets very dramatic. But you should be warned, it even says here in green in the lower part of this picture, that a minute of slow mo will take about 170 megabytes if you do the 120 frames per second, but 480 if you go to the 240. So it's going to take up a lot of space on your camera. Just know that you're shooting a lot of space when you get into this mode. And here's some examples of this high-speed photography. My wife made me clean that up afterwards. So now we can also do time-lapse photography, where we do really the opposite. You take a picture every so many seconds, and when you run it, then it goes quite fast. So now you see at the bottom, I'm in time-lapse mode. Again, there's a red button that you can click to get it started. And if you notice, there's also dots around the red button. They will go round and round and round, and every time it gets to the top, it'll take another picture. So you've got some idea of when it's going to take the pictures if you're looking at the camera. So here's an example of something I did at Keystone. You see the ferry going past. Here we are taking a picture every few seconds and then running them at normal speed. And notice right at the end here, I managed to catch a seagull. Now let's talk about portrait mode. You can see again at the bottom, I've scrolled left and right and found portrait, which is over near Pano. And in portrait, it's available on the later iPhones. Some of the early ones didn't have this. And on my camera, you can either use the ×1 or the ×2. You can see on the left-hand side there that this one's taken at ×2. Well, when you go into this mode, the camera tries to determine what's in the foreground and what the subject should be. And when it's found what it thinks the subject is, it puts a yellow box, well, not the box, the corners of a box around the subject. You can see here, this girl has got those yellow marks around her face. So this is what the camera is going to concentrate on. By default, the camera chooses to work in natural light. But if you look down at the bottom where it says natural light, there's actually a series of icons going off to the right-hand side. And there's like, I didn't count them, but I think there's about 10 of them. This is natural light indoors of someone I met. And if I change from the light, natural light, and scroll that thing to the right with my finger, I can go to another mode, such as stage light, which is exactly the same as the previous picture, except that I've moved to stage light. So it's found out where the background is and altered it to give this effect. Now, on the newer cameras too, you can also control the F number on the background. If you look up at the top, we'll look at the left picture first. Up at the top in yellow, there's an F number. If you press on the F number, that's the focal ratio. And for those of you who know, you can use this the way you use it on a regular camera. And otherwise, let me let you know that over on the, now looking at the bottom at the range of F numbers, on the left end is the smallest F number, which on this camera is F1.4. That's where the depth of focus is the worst. And you can see behind the girl who is in focus, everything is really blurred out badly because of the depth of focus. Whereas in the right-hand picture, we've slid it over to F16, which is the highest you can get on the iPhone cameras. And you see that the background is not nearly so badly out of focus because we've got a much better depth of focus, a longer range of depth of focus. And the foreground doesn't necessarily have to be a person. You can use this mode to take pictures of details of something. And here are some examples of things in the foreground that you want to focus on, but leave the background out of focus. And artistic photographers have a lot of fun with this too. You've probably seen pictures in magazines where this is a trick that they've pulled. Well, you can do it with your iPhone now. Admit it, these are all very sexy. So let me go back to what I was saying before. Oh, first of all, let me show you these irises. These irises are out now, so you can tell I took this picture very recently. And here's a picture that I took with the background just a little bit out of focus. And I shifted the F number and got this. You see the irises now in the foreground is still well focused, but the background's gone all fuzzy. And you get to choose which of these you like. Well, actually, you can have them both. Why not? Especially if you've got lots of memory. Okay, good photographs depend on focus. Actually on three things. Focus first, the speed, which determines what you can do with things that are moving, and the amount of exposure, partly because it affects the depth of focus. So the phone is pretty smart and will do its best to figure out what's important in the field of view and set these parameters automatically. So when you first just point and click, you really can point and click, and most of the time it'll try and do its best, and it does a pretty good job. But to make sure you get the picture you want, you can at any time tap on the picture where you want the focus to be and see with the yellow square like we did before. So right in here, I've chosen a point and say, I want these flowers to definitely be in focus. And then you look at that and see, is that point also got the right exposure? And if it's a little bit off, now grab that yellow sun to the right and move it up and down to get it correct. And when you're through and you got it just the way you want, you take your picture And what you set as being in focus is in focus, and hopefully the exposure is the way you wanted it to be. Sometimes, though, picking the exposure provides a dramatic shot, but in here, we've gone for the exposure as being the most important thing, and exposed where the sun is going down. So in this case, we've underexposed the people, and they've become silhouettes, but it's made for a very dramatic shot. So you may not necessarily want to focus or expose on the subject, which is actually the subject you want to take a picture of, but you want to make a silhouette or do something dramatic, of which here we have a pretty good example. Now, something else you can do is you can put your finger and you get the yellow box like we've got here, but by holding your finger down, you can turn on what's called the AE and AF lock, and you see them up at the top in yellow. It is telling me that that's got turned on, and that is the automatic exposure and automatic focus. So you focus on something and expose it exactly the way you want it, and then lock it. And the reason for doing that is that you want to set the camera to be able to take exactly the right picture of something, but something's going to change as you go along. So in here, we set the lock, and here's another example where we set the lock. So before this guy was walking around, we decided we want to lock on that sunny area up against that wall, but we didn't want the guy to change the exposure in any way. So we locked the exposure, then waited for the guy to walk past and took the picture at exactly the right moment. And we've really set him to be not totally exposed correctly, but the wall is totally exposed the way it should be. You'll find this AE and AF lock is particularly useful when you're doing street photography, especially in a lot of high contrast situations. And you can compose the photo in advance, but also lock the focus before somebody moves. So high dynamic range. This is something that came into iPhones relatively recently. I can't remember now, but I think iPhone X is the one that came out with it. So what is it? Normally your camera will struggle to capture all of the detail in a high contrast scene. So either you've got to get the detail, as I showed you earlier, in the bright areas or in the dark areas, because but if the bright areas are too bright and the dark areas are too dark, then you can use this system to turn on the Smart HDR. And we do that by going again back to the settings. And now you see down at the bottom here, there's another setting that we can put on. You can turn on the Smart HDR. Now the Smart HDR is not normally turned on. So by default, it's off. You need to turn this on. I suggest you turn it on and leave it on. If you leave it on, then it's going to make a better job of most of your point and click type of movies. And so you get a picture, well, here I've got it turned on, and you can see it's done a reasonable, well, the red arrow is showing you the HDR is up there, and it only appears up there if you've got it turned on. So it's up to you to click on it to turn it on or turn it off if you've got it turned off in settings. If you could turn it on in setting, it won't appear up there and it's always on. So in this case, that's where it is. And when you take pictures of scenes like this, it's actually a high contrast scene here, but the HDR has done its best by taking more than one picture and merging them so that it's exposed on the upper part of the picture where it's light, exposed on the darker part in the bottom picture, merged them, and it's given you a really smart picture here. So you can make a good picture out of a poor situation because your camera is pretty smart. All right, next thing I want to look at is burst mode. Burst mode also shows up in the bottom. sorry, it doesn't show on the bottom. Burst mode happens when you take a photo, but you hold your button down. If you hold the button down, it takes pictures, repeated pictures in a burst. So you have to finish up with 7 or 8 or sometimes more pictures. It can take up to 10 photos. It takes approximately 10 photos per second for as long as you hold down the shutter button. This makes it easy to capture the perfect action shot with the minimum amount of blur in it. To activate burst mode, hold down the shutter for a half a second or longer. Your iPhone will then start taking pictures in quick succession. After shooting a burst of images, you can choose the best photo from the sequence and delete the rest. Oh, well, let me go back one here. Yeah. So down at the bottom here, after you've taken a picture, you see down at the bottom here, you can select the one that you want to. The red is around the select. And once you hit select, you get what's over on the right-hand side. And in the right, you can see the burst pictures down at the bottom there. And you can click on the one, or in this case, he's picked 2 that he wants to save. So you can use burst mode to take a burst of pictures as some action is occurring. And so here's an example of one where most of the pictures weren't that good, but this one right in the center of the burst was just exactly what the photographer was looking for. You can use it for magic moments when you're doing street photography. In this particular case, the guy locked the exposure and focus on the background. Then he took the picture in burst mode as this lady walked past. And the reason he did that was because he wanted to catch her with both feet on the ground. When you catch somebody walking, if both feet are on the ground, she looks like she's stable. Whereas if you take it at the wrong moment, you suddenly see somebody who looks like they're out of balance, and the picture is less imposing. And of course, this one could only be done, I think, with burst mode, unless you're extremely good with your button. Notice that the camera doesn't always take the picture immediately. It has to take sometimes as much as 100 milliseconds to make the focus and make the exposure correct before taking the picture. So in this particular case, somebody set the focus and the exposure to the background, locked it, then in burst mode took this girl leaping into the air and was able to select the perfect picture. Okay, live photos is an iPhone camera feature that belongs to your iPhotos, brings your iPhotos to life. Rather than freezing a moment in time with a still photo, live photo can also create a moving image. Excuse me. The icon for it is up at the top, and it'll only be there if you turn it on. So in this case, they've turned it on as well as the HDR. So you can go up there and click on it when you want to use it. And then here it's active. And it works by capturing moments before and after you take the picture. So it's looking to see what you're pointing at, and it's smart enough to start recording before you click the picture. So that you get a sequence that looks like this. And now you can start to do anything with the sequence. You see on the left-hand side, if you want to, you can just have the thing as a live set. If you were to click on the second one, you would turn it into a loop so that it goes forward and then comes back to the beginning and goes forward again, back to the beginning and keeps looping. And if you were to take the third option on the right-hand side, you could get a sequence which goes forward to the end and then comes back to the beginning and then goes forward to the end and then comes back to the beginning. So you can record these things and then save them in any of those 3 modes. And here you can see, here's a whole set of them. In this particular case, we're looking at one of the frames within that sequence. And that sequence can be used with different effects. I showed you a moment ago the picture on the left where you can have it in live, loop, or bounce. But if I was to scroll those effects over to the right, you see there's another one called long exposure. And if you click on the long exposure, what it does is take all the pictures and combines them. So the picture on the left, you see the water is frozen in place, but on the right, the water looks smooth because it's taken several pictures together and blended them so that you now get the smooth surface on the water. It involves a number of pictures that have been pulled together. And this is just an example of a clip that you take. Usually they're only a few seconds. Now, at the very top on these screens, you'll notice that there's a little yellow arrow that's pointing down. What I've done is it normally points the other way. I tapped on it, and when I tapped on it, something happened on the lower part of the picture. So here's the thing I tapped on, and down here, you can see now I got a separate set of icons. And these are icons that you might find of some use. Oops, let me back up one. There we go. Here's a set of icons, and you see the first one tells me whether I'm going to use flash or not. In this case, I got flash turned off. And then there's live photos, which is currently on. The aspect ratio you can set. The default is 4:3, but you can also set it up to be 16:9, which is also useful when you're doing videos. The plus and minus is a way where you can manually also set the F number of the exposure. So you've got control over this at any time, as it turns out. And then that little clock looking thing is a timer, and it's currently set off, but when you turn it on, you can set it to anything from 3 to 10 seconds. So again, you can set up the timer on a tripod, and it's another way of taking pictures of yourself. You can walk over into the frame, tell everybody to say cheese, but don't tell them how long. And then take the shot. And finally, there's a set of filters, that little guy over on the right. These are filters that you can play with. And oops, let's do this. And then click it one more time. And here's a set of filters. And at the moment, I've clicked it onto Video Cool, but there's a whole lot of different ones down here. And you can see the effect immediately on the picture. The upper part of the picture there is now in Vivid Cool instead of natural color. And there's a whole bunch of these things in here, so you can experiment with them. Oh, this also appears if you put it if you're looking at something very dark. What I've done here is taken the camera and faced it down onto my desk. And so it sees that there's almost no light at all. I thought this would come out black, but it's managed to overexpose and get something anyway. But you see there's a yellow icon that's now appeared in that list. And that's because the camera's realized that it's really, really dark. And that's actually supposed to be a moon there, I think. But when you click on it, you find it puts up this auto, and you can change the number of seconds that you want the exposure to be. And you see up in the top left-hand side in yellow, it tells you how many seconds it's want to be. And at the moment, it's 4 seconds, and that's the default. But you can put your finger where it says auto down at the bottom there, and slide left and right to get the amount of time that you want. And by doing that, here's a few examples where people have used it to take long exposure shots. In this one, you can see there's even some stars at the top. And here's how to open enough that you can see that the Earth is rotating. Either that or the sky is. We take it the Earth is in this day and age. And it's long enough here to get star trails. So the iPhone camera, it looks simple to start out with, but on the surface, but when you start digging deeper, there are actually many capabilities. There are many hidden features and tricks, and I can only share a handful of them here during the time that I got. But once you really understand the iPhone camera, you'll be taking the kind of photos that compete with professionals. ebooks, and I put a couple of them up here by James Ninal on iPhone cameras, are well worth reading to get some more information. And you can find these on the Apple bookstore. There are others too that are written by other people, but these two are particularly good and can get into a whole lot more detail than I've been able to do today. And this presentation was partly taken from this website. This is a good website to go to, and I'm going to include it in the notes from this presentation. So it'll be on the website, and it'll also be part of Madeline's notes too. So you'll be able to go to it. It's worth going to partly because it's got what I've just been talking to you about, but which you can go through and read at your own pace. But also these guys run a set of schools. So if you want to participate in some schools where they get into even some of the more advanced features, it's well worth taking a look at. Well, gosh, I'm out of time, so I don't have time to explain this one. So I'm going to end it there, Harry. Happy clicking to you all.